My girlfriend got roped and wanted to keep the baby. I couldn't understand why, but then the disgusting truth behind her reasoning was revealed. My girlfriend Sarah was my world, but after she got roped at the party I wanted her not to go to, everything changed. She decided to keep the baby and called it a blessing in disguise the first time she told me she was pregnant. I simply couldn't see it that way. Every time I looked at her, I saw what he had done to her. I felt guilty for even considering leaving, but I didn't feel comfortable raising a kid that wasn't mine. I loved Sarah, but it just felt like too much to bear. I drove over to my friend Ryan's house. I asked him what he thought about it and what he would do in that situation. He joked and said, if I were Sarah or if I were you. I didn't even know why I came over here, knowing that Ryan makes everything a joke. After I told him seriously how I felt, he said that it was up to me and that if I felt like it was too much to handle, then to leave. He said he wouldn't stay, but he said I should make the decision based on our relationship. I agreed and left his house feeling conflicted. I left with more questions than I had before I went. On the car ride home, I called up my other friend that I met in our frat in college. I broke down the entire situation for Jason, and since we weren't as close as we were before, I told him it was a hypothetical situation. I think he figured out soon enough it was my reality. He told me that he would stay if he loved Sarah, because she would already have to deal with the aftermath of being roped, and I didn't want to add more damage to the healing process. He said he would stay for the sake of the baby as well, since kids that grow up without fathers tend to be less successful in life. I forgot that Jason was pro-life, but I just desperately needed some sort of validation from someone. By the time we said our goodbyes, I was pulling back into my driveway. I knew after talking to my friends that I would have to come to this decision on my own. I walked inside the house and asked Sarah if she had the time to talk. After she agreed, I told her my feelings and how I felt about the whole situation. I told her how sorry I was that she was experiencing this and how torn she must feel about her trauma and the aftermath. Sarah had grown up in a religious household. Her family would go to mass at the Catholic Church 3 days a week. I knew what I was getting into when I decided to be with her, so asking her if she would be open to terminating the pregnancy would be like pulling teeth. After I proposed a termination of pregnancy, she looked at me as if I had asked her to throw puppies into the fireplace. She then told me that I already knew the answer to that question. I then tried to tell her that I didn't feel comfortable raising a kid that was not mine and how it could affect our relationship if she kept the child. She told me that if I had a problem with raising the kid, then I wouldn't be the one for her. She called me selfish for wanting to leave after knowing what she's been through. I told her that I would try my best to help her with starting therapy and healing from the incident, but a kid would change the entire dynamic of our relationship. She said she was done with this conversation and stormed off into the bedroom. I sat there feeling defeated and not knowing where to go from there. I truly loved Sarah and wanted the best for her, but I was torn because I didn't want to stay somewhere where I knew I would be unhappy for the rest of my life. I didn't think I could handle the weight of the resentment. The weeks that followed were an emotional roller coaster. Me and Sarah would have amazing days. We would go on dates to our favorite spots, then come home and enjoy one another. Then after a while, Sarah would say something about the baby or speak about how she's gonna miss times like this after the baby is born, and it would cause us to go through the same argument that we had the first night. I'd tell her that she wouldn't have to miss those times because we could just get rid of the baby. Then she'd tell me that I was being selfish again and to just let her have this one thing, and it would always end the same way. Sarah was keeping the baby, and there was nothing I could do about it. After a few days, she would think that I had forgotten the argument, or think that I agreed to be with her since I didn't treat her differently, and things would go back to normal until again, she'd bring up something about the baby, and we'd have that same back and forth disagreement. I just couldn't understand why Sarah, who was 19 at the time, would want to keep this baby. Babies are crazy expensive. We were both in college at the time and had enough loans as it was. A baby would only put us in more debt. I understood the religious aspect of it, but she never seemed that interested in having any kids when we met. What changed? I went to bed that night, laid down in my dark bedroom, and began thinking. I needed to know what changed in Sarah and how we could move past it, or if we could. I decided the next day to go through Sarah's phone. I know it's not the best thing that I could have done, but talking to her about the baby only ended in arguments. I needed to know why she wanted to keep the baby so bad. I saw her text messages with her friend Bridget. There all I saw was a bunch of cat memes and the occasional girl talk about Bridget's dating life. They didn't speak much about the baby. Then I went through the rest of her most recents. They were mainly text messages from Victoria's Secret or Bath & Body Works with coupons. I felt hopeless until I stumbled across the conversation she had with her parents. I opened the group chat and see text messages from her mom the night after the incident. Her mom texted her that she wouldn't have got roped if she wasn't always showing her belly button piercing, and how she told her that she always wanted to go party with her friends, and look at where it got her. This text was as long as the phone screen. She went on to say that she shouldn't be wearing the makeup she does, and how she's always attracted attention from men since a young age, hence why the priest at their old church had to step down. She blamed her for looking too pretty, and that she tried to warn her about her promiscuous ways. Later in the text, she told her that she'd better keep it if she wanted to make it to heaven. She said that she did enough by acting like a Jezebel, and that the kid would help her slow down. She ended the hate-filled text by telling her that everything that happened to her, she deserved it. Sarah's reply wasn't there because I assumed she called her mom or talked to her in person. I checked her call log, and sure enough, 8 minutes after receiving the text message to the group chat with Sarah and her parents, Sarah had called her her mom. At that moment, Sarah had walked into the kitchen where I was reading her phone. I swiped out of the messages and closed the app. Then I locked her phone and threw it down on the kitchen table with a quickness. Without being able to process what I read, I had to collect myself fast. I greet Sarah with a hug and a kiss. I could only imagine the heartache she had been through. I asked her how she was doing, trying to be as compassionate as possible. I still wanted to talk about the kid and her mom and the incident, but I knew I couldn't tell her what I knew without her, knowing that I went through her phone. She told me she was making it, but I knew from the bags under her eyes that she was going through it. I asked her if there was anything that I could do to help her, and she told me that breakfast would solve all the problems in the world right now. I chuckled and began reaching for the fridge. The next couple of weeks I tried my best to take care of her and to get her everything she needed. The realization that she didn't want the baby and her parents forcing her to have it anyway gnawed away at me. I hated that she didn't have anyone to advocate for her, but I also was torn in speaking on the matter because I didn't want to start an argument and stress her out more. Or if she found out that I went through her phone, I didn't want to lose the trust that we spent building together. One night, after running her bath and cooking her favorite meal for her, I decided that I would ask her to talk to me. I wanted to know the full truth. After dinner, she asked what did I do to deserve this treatment, and I told her for being the best girlfriend ever, and we laughed. I then cleared my throat and asked her if she could talk. I could easily see the expression on her face turn from contentedness to skepticism. She asked about what, and I told her everything. I told her how I went through her phone and saw the message from her mom, and how I knew that she didn't really want the baby, but she was trying to please her parents. And I told her how I knew about the trauma from her parents and how they blamed her for the incident. And I just wanted to know the full truth from her perspective. After I finished telling her everything, she began to cry. I went over to console her, and she wept. She wasn't mad that I went through her phone. It seemed like a buildup of everything had just hit her at once. From the incident, our relationship, her parents, the baby, and balancing school, she had crumbled. Through her cries, she said she wanted to leave the past behind her, and that this baby was a living reminder of what had happened that one night at the party. I reminded her that I was there for her, and that we would get through this. She shook her head yes, and held me tighter. I told her that we would terminate the pregnancy if that's what she truly wanted, and she again shook her head yes. The next morning, I woke her up to breakfast in bed, and told her good morning. She said good morning, and we began eating. I wanted to know if the breakthrough we had the night before was real, or if she would let fear settle in. So after breakfast, I asked her if what she said last night was what she really meant. She hesitated for a second, and told me that she was scared of what her parents might do if they found out. I told her that she wasn't under their roof anymore, so it didn't matter, and how they've been nothing but a toxic influence on her life. She agreed, and grabbed her laptop. I asked her what she was doing, and she said that she was looking up places in the area to terminate the pregnancy. We spent the rest of the morning finding the right place for Sarah. When we found one, we called up there and got her an appointment. I asked her how she was doing mentally with everything, and if she had grown attached to the baby. Sarah looked me in the eye and asked if she could be honest. I told her absolutely, and she said that every day she felt like she had a parasite growing inside her that made her feel dirty. She knew it wasn't the baby's fault, but she could never love it as much as a mother should love her child if she were to follow through with the pregnancy. After talking to me, she said she felt relieved to get that off her chest. When she tried to talk to her mom about it, she felt guilty, and was only met with criticism. And when she tried to talk to Bridget, it was the same way. Bridget had grown up in the same church as Sarah's family, and practiced their beliefs more faithfully than Sarah. Days went by, and eventually, the appointment was here. I drove Sarah to her appointment and waited in the waiting room. After the procedure was done, she said she felt lightheaded and a bit of pain, so I took her home and laid her on the couch. I put on her favorite cooking show and sat in the chair beside her as she rested. Then her phone started ringing. The caller ID showed it was her mother, and we both shared a glance as it buzzed on the coffee table. I asked her if she was going to pick it up, and she said if she didn't, her mom would call until she did. She picked up the phone, and her mom asked her how she was doing. Sarah told her she was fine, just a little lightheaded. She asked why she was lightheaded, and was the baby okay. Sarah got choked up and said she needed rest. I didn't hear much on the other side anymore except for her mom saying that she was coming over and hung up. Sarah looked terrified. She didn't have the courage to tell her mom that she had just terminated the pregnancy. I offered to tell the parents when they came over and told her to go to the bedroom. When they both showed up at the door, I answered, and they immediately asked for Sarah. I told them she was resting, but they demanded to see her. I told them to sit in the living room for a talk. They could tell from the tone of my voice what the talk was going to be about, and they were already furious. They demanded to know how the baby was doing and wanted to see Sarah at that instant. Sarah came into the living room, and they saw the painkillers from the clinic on the kitchen counter. I stood between them as they tried to spew hatred at Sarah. They told Sarah that she was a disgrace to the family, and that none of this would have happened if she wasn't dressing like a whore. I told them to leave the house before I called the police, and that if they showed up there again, he would get a restraining order. I told them that the only way that they would be allowed in our lives again would be if they came crawling back, begging for forgiveness. They said they would never want anything to do with sinners like us, and Sarah's father guided him and his wife out of the house. A year later, we were sitting on the balcony of our apartment, enjoying the sun of a Saturday morning. I heard our doorbell ring, and Sarah looked at me in confusion because we were not expecting any company today. I told her to stay there and went to open the door. To my surprise, it was her parents. They said they missed their little girl and that they wanted to make it right. Sarah had already forgiven them and said it would take years to fix their relationship, so they tried. They started spending more time together, and they would come over for dinner and even have us for dinner on weekend nights. We'd play board games and catch up, but the conversation would, without fail, turn sour by the end of the night. Her parents would say something that would trigger her, and it would end in an argument, and me and Sarah would have to leave. Sarah was going to therapy, but she wasn't completely healed from the years of trauma that her parents had put her through. And after multiple failed attempts at rekindling a relationship with her parents, she realized that the damage was done and there was no way to fix it. The months that followed their conversations were few and far between, and eventually, they lost contact. Me and Sarah's relationship was great and felt fulfilling on both of our ends, and we knew we only needed each other to get through life.